Boker Tov. Today's Daf is Daf Mem Beis Nidrim. Is willing for a fortune and then for a fegachaya. So the Mishnah from the top of the page says as follows: Hamudar aname chavero. Let's keep the example where we talked where Reuben cannot have enough from Shimon. Either Reuben forswore having enough from Shimon, he says all your assets are forbidden to me, or Shimon said to Reuben, you can't have any of my assets. You're forsworn from having to me. They're like a carbon to you. Either way, that's available. So the mudar is, let's say, Reuben. He's the one who's not allowed to have enough. From Shimon, who is like the madir. Let's say Shimon forbade him from having enough. So if it's lifnei shvius, and he said all hana, or any pleasure, you can't have any of my assets. All my assets are forbidden to you. If it's before shvius, meaning it's not a shemitah year. So very simple. Reuben can't have enough of him. Any other tafsadeu. Reuben cannot go into Shimon's field at all. Can't use it as a shortcut. Can't have any pleasure there. Not just eating the fruits. Notos. He can't even eat from notos, or the overhanging fruits, the fruits that hang over from Shimon's field, let's say, onto the sidewalk, onto the street. But they're still his. I get that all the time where people come by and grab pomegranates, tangerines, all kinds of stuff that Pepe has growing there. People take all kinds of stuff, just grab it, They take flowers too. They take anything, mocho, but people feel free to do what they want. But here, when you can't have enough from Reuben, can't have enough from Shimon, he's not allowed to take even what we call the notos, the overhanging fruit. Uva shvius, and here's the key. Uva shvius, and if he swore, now I'm learning the way the Ran learns on the left side. Uva shvius eni orotos deu avalochu minan notos. Listen to this carefully. If he made the netter, notice he says lifnei shvius in the first line. They made the netter shvius. What do you mean lifnei shvius? It could be after shvius. Why after the? It means not in shvius. That's the key, because he's trying to tell you that if he made the netter before shmita, now what's the rule in shmita? In shmita, all your parents are hefker. Anybody could take them, right? So you can't really forswear him from having enough. Somebody comes, if it was shmita fruits, we still have shmita fruits, and I say to people, you can't have any of them. I can't do that because they're already hefker. God was mafka them, right? So, but if, listen carefully, if, let's say in the fourth or the fifth year, I said, you are forbidden for having enough from me, here on out, for here ever, then even during Shemitah, you can't have enough from them. Because that's the Chiddush here. The Chiddush is that if he made the netter lifnei shvius, even during Shemitah, because a person can forbid something on somebody else that I have control on today, even afterwards if I don't have control later on. The Gemara is going to give the example. If a man says, people are stupid enough to do this. A man has 5 sons, and he says to one of them, you can't inherit me. Now, today, if you have a will, you could take it out of the will. But he says this one, he doesn't want to inherit him, right? So if he says you can't have any of my assets, well, after the man dies, they don't belong to him anymore. So he could. But if he says in death also, he has the ability to do that. The idea here is like there he specified. The Gemara is going to talk about that. But the chiddush over here is that you can forbid something on somebody even after you lose control of it. So when we read the Mishnah, look at the Mishnah carefully again. As long as I made the netter before Shemitah, let's say Shimon said to Reuben, you can't have enough from me, and he made the netter before Shemitah. He can't even them. Paris, he can't have any of it, even during Shemitah, because he can do that. Uva shvius, that's the Ran says in the third line. If he made the netter in Shemitah, too late. In Shemitah, you want to forbid me? If Shimon says you can't have enough of my parents, no, you can't forbid. I can't forbid your cup on somebody else, right? I can forbid my stuff on you. I can't do. So if he made the netter in Shvius, that's the key that we're going to be talking about. If he made that in Shvius, okay, wait a minute. In Shemitah, listen carefully now. I said during Shemitah, if I say you can't have enough from me at all. So for Shvius, and if I made the netter in Shemitah, well, I could say you can't go into my field because my field belongs to me, l'chora, right? The field, the land, etc. You can't have my coat, right? That Shemitah doesn't forbid me from answering my coat on you. But avalochalu notos, the gears, he takes out the his. But I can eat the his. Why? Because the notos don't belong to you. They don't belong to Shimon. You can't forbid me having it. So the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute, but how am I supposed to get the fruit if I can't go into your field? right? We're saying in Shemitah, if Shimon said you can't have enough of my payros, that doesn't work. Reuben can have enough of the payros because they don't belong to Reuben, to Shimon. If Shimon made the netter before Shemitah, and then Shemitah came along, Reuben still can't have enough because he made the netter at a time when he could forbid it. It applies even later on. But if he made the netter in Shemitah, then Reuben could have enough of payros. So why can't he go into the field to get the payros? So the Gemara is going to talk about that. Either it's Xera because we're afraid you'll stay in the field too long. You're only allowed to go into, in other words, when the Torah said you can go in the base, it means you're entitled to go into the field to get the payros. But we're afraid since he made a netter, can't have enough, I'm afraid he might have more enough there. In other words, if it's in general, there's no Nadarim involved. You have a field, you got some fruits. I can go into your yard and take your fruits because that's the only way I'm going to get them. Right? So that's what the Gemara is going to say, but we're afraid you might say they're too long. So this is when he made the netter in middle of Shemitah. In middle of Shemitah, he can't forbid the payros. Nadarim and Machal. Let's say Shimon didn't forbid all pleasure from Reuben. He just said food, and we learned before what is food. Any annal that comes to food, it could include your kitchen utensils, the kelim that are used to prepare the food. But he basically forbade him food again. Lifnei shviyas, if he only forbade him from the food, I could use the field as a shortcut. I could go into your field. I could play ball there. I'm not from the food. I can't eat from the payros because Shimon can prevent Reuben from eating his payros. But in Shemitah, when he said you can't eat my payros, he didn't even forbid the field. He just said you can't eat my payros. Okay, so you can still eat the payros because you can't forbid mess. I cannot forbid anybody from taking the tangerines and the pomegranates that are on my tree since they're Shemitah fruit. I can't. If I say it's like me saying you can't. He can't use your coat. I can't. I have no authority of ownership on that. So this is what the Mishnah said. So again, carefully, if I made the netter before Shemitah, we're going to assume now I can forbid payros even afterwards. If I made the middle of Shemitah, it doesn't work. So now l'chor we're going to see a machlokas about this issue. L'chor, but we're going to come out.
Is this related in any way to what we had before about the guy who takes truma from even though he's also on the thing?
Well, no. So again, he's allowed to. Oh, you mean where there was a netter involved? Yeah. So he's allowed to give truma for somebody else because there he's not giving him directly hana. Here we're talking about direct hana, where Shimon prevent him. You can't eat my fruits. You can't have any enough for me. So here it's direct. Here it's direct. The only issue is the Shemitah. They'll just say go into the field. Right. No. So we did it. We did it before. What's the difference with that? Perhaps we started off with the first mission of the parak. What's the difference in a mutter anam mechavero lemutter mena machol? That's the difference is Drisas regular. Can you go into the field? So again, there is that part of that in this Mishnah too. If he forbade all hana from him, so he can't go into the field, he can't take the fruits at all, and he can even do it in Shemitah also. He can prevent him from doing that because he made this before. If he only did it in Shemitah, then he can't, right? So there is that difference there too. But if he only forbade him food or food-related items, then he could go into the field, but just can't eat anything. But the difference there is, did he make that before Shemitah or no Shemitah? So now we're going to see a machlok about that. Rav and Shmuel, beginning about Rav Shmuel, Rav and Shmuel both say the following. Now here are the girsa. This is again important because we're going to make a difference between nechasai, when I forbid my assets to you, right? My assets are forbidden to you, or my food is forbidden to you. Well, in Shemitah, it's not mine anymore. So the thing goes away anyway. So it's very easy to understand. If I say my assets are forbidden to you to eat, let's say my food is also to you to eat. Okay, but what about in Shemitah? Well, in Shemitah, it's not mine anymore. So did I really forbid them? But if I say these assets are forbidden to you, so these assets are these assets, period. We're going to see later on. Man says, listen, you're forbidden, or man says to himself, says, I'm angry at you. I'm never going to come into your house again. Your house is also to me, right? Can't go in the house. What happens when the guy sells the house? Not his anymore, right? I'm angry at you. I don't want you to come inside. I say your house is forbidden. You sell your house to somebody else. I can go in the house. But I say this house is forbidden to me forever, that means forever, no matter who sells it. So when I say nechasim elu, that's stronger than nechasai, because nechasai means as long as they're mine. In Shemitah, they're not mine. So that's going to be the issue. So the chora, the girsa that the Bach corrects over here is Rav Shmuel Tamar Tavayu, nechasai alecha. My assets are forbidden to you. So Lifnei Shvius, before Shvius, and I can't go into your field. I'm Reuven, you forbade me from going into all your assets. I can't go in. I can't eat even the overhanging fruits that hang outside your field. Even though Shvius has come. Even though Shvius has come, but Shvius are not yours anymore. But you can forbid me from L'chora, Nechasai, when he said Nechasai. Then Shvius not if he made a netter in Shvius, like you saw in the Mishnah. Well, I can't go into your field because I can't have enough from you. I can eat from the overhanging fruits. Okay, again, so I raised the point in the Mishnah. Gemara's going to ask it on the days. What do you mean? How am I supposed to get to the fruits if I can't go into your field? So it's exera that you might stay there too long. But the key over here is that l'cha'ora, we're going to come out that the girsa is like we read it in our Gemara. But at this point, we're assuming the Rav and Shmuel say, even though I said nechasai elu, Shimon said nechasai alecha. Shimon said my assets are forbidden to you, and I made that netter before Shemitah. Even though Shemitah has come, and they're not mine anymore, but the prohibition still is there. That's what Rav and Shmuel say. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, they say, Rabbi Yochanan apparently disagree. They say, Nechasai alecha, again, my assets are from you. Lifnei Shvius eino tachsadeu. For Shemitah, I can forbid you from my assets. He can't eat the overhanging fruits. Higia Shvius, notice it says Higia Shvius, not that he made the Shvu and Shvius. Shvius came, I made the letter before Shemitah. Right? Shvius is Shemitah. That if Shemitah came, I can't go into the field because I might have enough from you, and that's forbidden. You can forbid me from having enough from you even during Shemitah. Just the food isn't yours. Avalochel was a pass. I could eat the notes. I could eat the overhanging fruits. So here, l'chora, we see a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel on the one hand, and Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish on the other hand. Not if you made the netter in Shemitah. Everybody agrees, if I made a netter in the middle of Shemitah, you can't have my parents. My parents are us. I can't do that. They're not my parents. They're hefker. Can't do that. Everybody agrees that. But if I made the netter before Shemitah, is it valid even during Shemitah? So Rav and Shmuel apparently say, yeah, even though Shvius has come, I can't eat the fruits. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says, no, once Shemitah has come, could eat the fruits. So if he says the machlokas, the Gemara says, let's say the machlokas is as follows. Rav and Shmuel hold that a person can forbid something that's in my rishus. Shimon owns the fruits now. He can forbid them on Ruvain now. Why? Because Shimon says today, in let's say the fourth year of Shemitah, he says, my assets are forbidden to you. Okay, so Reuben can't eat them. Even when Shemitah comes, it says, Afapi, what did Rav and Shmuel say in the third line of the Gemara? Afi shegia Shvius, even though Shvius has come, he can't eat them anymore, but they don't belong to him anymore. Still, you can forbid something which is in your rishus today, even when they leave your rishus later on, like the fruits, which during Shemitah, they don't belong to Reuben anymore. Let's make it simple, right? They don't belong to Reuben belong to Shimon anymore. Still, Shimon can ask them on Reuben. That's l'chara what Rav and Shmuel is saying. Rabbi Yochanan said, no, I can forbid you something while it's mine, but later on when it's not mine anymore, I can't forbid it. So I can't forbid you, even if in the fourth or the fifth or the sixth year of Shemitah, I say, my assets are forbidden to you, but when Shemitah comes along, I can't prohibit you from eating my fruits. So that's the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, who say, you cannot forbid something that you have authorization over to your ownership today. I can't forbid it on you after it leaves my rishus. Whereas Rav and Shmuel say you could. That's the machlokas. Rav and Shmuel say I can forbid something on you even after it leaves my rishus, if it leaves my ownership. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish say you can't. You can't for once when Shemitah comes along. It's not Shimon's anymore. Then Reuben could have enough. Says the Gemara. Wait a minute. You stand to machlokas Tizbra. You really want to say that? I'll ask you, Kasha. Is there really anybody who says that you cannot forbid something on somebody else if you own it today, even after it leaves rishus? The imkain, if that's the case, if that's the machlokas, that you can't forbid that somebody holds you. I cannot forbid something on you, even though I own it today for after I leave. So I talk about nechasai. Remember I said before, nechasai, it's obvious. My assets are forbidden to you. Well, Once it's not mine anymore, it's not my assets. That's obvious. If somebody really holds that I can't forbid something that I own today on you after order, so make the machlok is better. Nechasim elu, like we had that, like the gears, like the Gemara reads, nechasim elu alecha, right? Not the way the Bach corrected it. So argue about nechasim elu, meaning even though I say these assets are forbidden to you for all time, right? Like I can't go into this house forever, no matter who owns it, right? So the same thing, say nechasim elu, these assets, which apparently is a stronger lashon. These assets are always going to be forbidden to you. But if one holds, if there is a shita, if Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish really say you cannot forbid something on somebody else after you own it, even though you own it today, you can't forbid them for later on. So say nechasim elu. These assets are also to you, but you know what? I can't ask for them after I don't own them anymore, whether it's shemitah or I sold them or whatever. So why don't you make the machlokas there? But koshkem in the chasai. Say the machlok, if somebody holds that you cannot forbid something on somebody else after you, that you own today, you can't forbid it later on. Why talk about nechasai, which is very obvious? If I say nechasai or also obviously, when they're not mine anymore, you can use them. Why? So say the machlokas even nechasam elu, even where the lashon is mashma that you are forbidding it for all time. Koshem nechasai. That's one question. The sub, and then the other question is, I'm going to show you this. Hatzanan, we learned, most of the Shabbos like says, we have a favorite Shabbos which says, we're going to see this later on from Mem Zayin, that a person can definitely forbid something on somebody else, even after it leaves the Shabbos. In that case I mentioned before, no, a man tells his son, you're a bad boy, Konim Shatan Hanisli, you can't have any enough from me. All my assets are forbidden to you, boy. Mace, and now the man dies, you're a Shenu, the son can inherit him. Because what did he say? He said, you can't have enough for my assets. Well, they're not his assets anymore. Once the man dies, he doesn't have ownership anymore. You having enough for me, Mace? Well, once the man dies, the son isn't having enough from him. He's having enough from his own assets, right? Because he's one of the heirs. Let's say he said, you can't have enough of me, b'chayav uvamoso. You can't have enough of me in life and in death. Then in Mace lo yershenu. Then if he dies, the son cannot inherit. The Ram points out over here, the lo yershenu is lav dafka. Lav dafka to him because he doesn't inherit him. See, if a man doesn't have a will stating otherwise, meaning that he gives his assets away before he dies, then as soon as he dies, the halachos of the Torah take effect. If a man had 5 sons, let's say he had a daughter first, and then he had 5 sons, the 5 sons and split the assets equally. They all get 20%. So in this case, where one of the sons was a bad boy, and the father said, "You can't have enough for me in life and in death," that means that even in death, he can't have enough. He doesn't. The Ran says he doesn't really take away the Yerusha because the Yerusha is effective automatically. So in this case, let's say you had Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehudi, Yisachar. Yisachar was a bad boy and he forbade him to have enough. So Yisachar owns it, but he can't have enough from it. He's a 20% owner in the air. So what does he do? He could borrow money, and then the Baal Chov could take it from there because they're getting it directly. We'll talk about that later on. But in Meis Lo Yoshem, it's not Lo Yoshem Lav Dafka, but he can't have enough from it. The point is that the netter is chal even after death. So how can we say, we want to say Machlokas Rav and Shmuel on the one hand versus Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish on the other hand is whether you can forbid something that you own today on somebody else even after you don't own it anymore. Number one, if that's Machlokas, let them argue by Nechasam Elu and certainly by Nechasai. And number two, we have this mission which says that you could forbid something on somebody after a man could forbid his assets on his children, on one or two of his sons, whatever, even after he dies. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Yoch on the top line on Beis, Shani Yoch the B'chai Muslim. Maybe it's different over here because he said specifically in life and in death. Because he said specifically, but in a Stam case, right? When he said Stam, like in our Mishnah, where he said Stam, my assets are forbidden to you, or these assets are forbidden to you. So there apparently maybe you wouldn't be able to ask on somebody else, but still the first kasha applies. Doesn't want to become Malcolm kasha. We have the first kasha. What was the first kasha? If Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish and Rav and Shmuel are arguing whether you can forbid something on somebody else after death, Rav and Shmuel says you can. Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish say you can. So argue by Nechasim Elu. If you say you can't do it, I can't forbid something on you after I don't own it anymore, after I die, after I don't know whatever. Say the machlokes over there. Why don't you say it here? It says Ella ben Nechasim Elu. The Gemara says no. Nechasim Elu. When a man says these assets are forbidden to you, it's like the case where I said this house is forbidden to me. I don't like you. So if I say I'm never going to come into your house is forbidden to me, your house, it's not yours anymore, I can go in there. But if I say this house is forbidden, nechasam elu, then it applies for all time. The chasam elu, the Rashi says the mashma chasam elu laolam, forever. But a chasam elu korban pligi. Everybody says the chasam elu, these assets are forbidden to me. These assets, then they're forbidden for all time, no matter who owns it. There's a pligi. Maybe the machlokas is b'nechasai, my assets. Rav and Shmuel saber loshon chasam elu loshon chasai. Again, this is also another havner. Rav and Shmuel say nechasai, because remember we changed the gears in the Mishnah at the first line of the Gemara. The Bach changed it to nechasai. Rav and Shmuel say even nechasai, not just nechasam elu, loshna nechasam elu, loshna nechasai. The person can forbid something that he owns today on somebody else, even after the forbidder, the madir, doesn't own it anymore. Like he said before, Rav Meir Shapiro said no. Nechasam elu, if he says these assets are a moser, nechasai ain't a moser, because I said my assets are of you, and they're not mine anymore. I died, or I sold them, or I gave them away to somebody else, and can't answer on you. Says the Gemara, is there anybody, you want to say Rav and Shmuel say there is no difference between nechasai and nechasam elu, either way you could do it. Is there such thing that there's no difference between nechasam elu and nechasai? But Tanan we learn, this case I mentioned before with the house. Your house is forbidden for me. I'm not going to go in, or your field that I'm going to buy, forbidden for me for all time. If you're not the owner anymore, you died or you sold a machla acher, mutter, I'm allowed to, because I said I'm forbidding your house. I'm never going to go into your house. I'm never going to buy your field from you. But if I bought it from somebody else, then it's okay. L'bayis zeh, but if I forbid this house, shani nichnas, I'm never going to come into this house. This house is forbidden to me for all time. Or sadazu shani lokech, this field that I'm never going to buy again. I'm never going to, even if I buy it, I can't have it. Then meis oshamach lacher, it's still usher, because I forbade the house itself. I forbade the field itself. It doesn't make an image who the owner is. So there's clearly a difference between if I say this house, this field, versus your house, your field. So how could you say that Rav and Shmuel say there's no difference if I say nechasam elu or nechasai? I say my assets are forbidden to you. My assets are forbidden to you. Shimon says to Reuben, my assets are forbidden to you, even after Shimon dies or sells them to somebody else. Or in this case, in our Mishnah, Shemitah comes along and takes him out of his rishus. They're still usher. No, it can't be usher because he said my assets are forbidden to you. How could you say that? When Shemitah comes along and they're not my assets anymore, they're forbidden. You said nechasai. Ella, you know what the Gemara says? We're going to make peace over here. Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan don't argue at all. We're going to go back to the way the Gemara reads without the bach on Aman Aleph. Ella kiyam Rabbi Yochanan b'nechasai. When Rabbi Yochanan said their case, said their piece on Aman Aleph, halfway down the page, Rabbi Yochanan said to Rav, nechasai alecha, my assets are forbidden to you, and he did it before Shmita. It's okay. Before he assets, he could do that before Shmita. Angels that can't go into the field and he can't eat even from the overhang. So he gives shvius, but if shvius came along, angel tells that you can't go. Why? Because he said my assets. He can't go into the field, but he could eat. Right, but he could eat the. He gives shvius on the avalochos. He could eat the fruits. Why? Because they're not his anymore. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Listen, if I forbid my field, all my assets to you in the 6th year, you can't go into my field. You can't eat anything. Comes along the 7th year." It's not mine anymore. It's free. It's hefker. Then he could go in because he said nechasai. My assets are forbidden to you. Whereas and Rav and Shmuel, what are they talking about? Rav and Shmuel b'nechasam elu. Rav and Shmuel at the beginning of the Gemara Aman Aleph. Rav and Shmuel damatavayu b'nechasam elu. We're going to read it the way it reads now, not the way the Bach changed it. In the Havamina, it said nechasai elu. That led us into all these problems. Rav and Shmuel say no. If he said nechasam, these assets are forbidden to you, then even if Shemitah comes along. That's why, because I have the ability to assert assets on you that belong to me today, even after I don't own them anymore. If Shemitah comes along and I don't want the fruits, or I sold the field to somebody else, or I sold the house to somebody else, I could, because I said this house, this field, these fruits, these assets. I didn't say mine. If he said mine, then everybody says, once they're not his anymore, I said my assets are for you. So that's it. Once they're not mine anymore, you could have it. But if I said these assets are also for you, everybody agrees they can't ask them later on. And that's proud of the Mishnah. The Mishnah didn't have the machlokas over here. The Mishnah said very simple. Hamur, if you look back in the Mishnah, if he made enough, you can't have enough from these assets. You can't have enough from these assets. Even if Shemitah came along and they're not his assets anymore, you can't have enough. But if he made the netter in Shemitah, in middle of Shemitah said, These assets you can't answer them. They're not yours anymore. They're already belong to Hefker. So there's no machlokus over here. The question is simply, did you say nechasai or did you say nechasmeu? So the Gemara B'Shvius ein yotos there in Shmita, and then we said, what's B'Shvius? If he made the neder in the middle of Shmita, I can't forbid you from eating the fruits. They're not mine. They belong to Hefker. U'B'Shvius ein yotos adeu. But what? So he said, Ma'aseh the ochel and anotos. So why do you say, if I made the neder in Shemitah, I said what? You can't eat my fruits. I said you can't. All my assets are forbidden to you. I can't forbid you from eating the fruits. You can eat the fruits. You can eat the fruits, but you can't go into the field. Why not? How come it? The ochem and I notice the payer because the payers are hefker, and I can't forbid them on you. The payers, the hefker inun, these payers belong to hefker. They are ownerless. Aranami after the land is also ownerless in terms of getting the fruits. What does it mean? The fruits are you're allowed to go in the middle of Shemitah into somebody's field in order to get the payrolls. So the field is also hefker. So Ula says a very simple. He says like the word case works out in a very in one surah only. The trees that I want to get the fruits from are hanging on the border of your fence. And I could access them from the sidewalk. Like people who go over to my trees, they stand on the sidewalk and they pick the trees up without going to my field. When the Torah says that the fruits are hefker and allows other people to go into my field to get it, that's the only way they can get the fruits, by going into my yard. They got to go in there to pick them. But if they can pick them by standing outside, then there's no reason to go into my field. The Torah doesn't allow that. It's only if there's no other way. Right, there's no other way, so that's why he's allowed to. Says the Rashi. Torah says my field is hefker on Shvius for eating purposes, but he doesn't have to go in to eat the stuff because he can eat it. He can access the fruits from standing outside my field. That's Ula's answer. No, we're talking about, you're right. In the case that you said that if the fruits are all on the border and you can get it without, that's fine. But even if the fruits are inside and you can't get to them, because you're saying that the fruits are inside, you could go in. Shimon Yaakov says, no, even if the fruits are inside, right, and you can't get to them, you know what? If we have Xavier, you shouldn't go into the field because we're afraid you'll stand there too long. And you can have anah there. And the Ryan asks the kasha over here, how is this different than, remember, if Shimon can't give anah to Reuven, and Reuven gets sick, he says he can go into the hospital room, but he has to stand there. He can't sit. We don't say don't go in at all, because maybe you'll sit down. Because there, the Ran says, normally when you go in to visit a sick person, you sit down there and you talk to him. So this, when you're forced to stand, when you're made to stand, you're not going to sit down because you're not allowed to sit down because you're not allowed to give him anah. That's different. But here, when you go into the field, obviously you stand there and you pluck the tree. So we're afraid if you stand there, you might stand there too long beyond park. Maybe you'll stand there and have a conversation or shield yourself under a tree from the sun or have enough from him in some way. Therefore, you can't go in at all. So Shimon Yaakov disagrees. The Rashi says, you're right. Right, you're right. If the fruits are on the border, of course you could eat the fruits, stand outside and take them. But if they're inside, you can't go in because you might have a no. If you look at Rosh Hashanah, you shouldn't go in there because he might come to stay there too long and have a no. Remember, I can forbid you from having a no from my assets. All I can't do is in the middle of Shemitah. If in the middle of Shemitah I said you can't have an no from my assets, I can't forbid you from the fruit, but I could forbid you from going into my barn and having another or seeking shelter or whatever. That I could do. Now again, Shimon cannot give the nod to Reuven. Reuven forbade himself from having enough from Shimon, or Shimon forbade Reuven from having enough from him. Lo yishilenu, he shouldn't lend him any items. Lo yishil mimenu, and he shouldn't borrow from him. So the Gemara is going to say, what do you mean? What do you mean? Lo yishilenu, right? One we can understand. If Shimon's not supposed to give Reuven enough, so Reuven can't borrow anything from him. But why can't Shimon borrow things from Reuven? Right? Lo yishilenu. Why can't Reuven lend something to Shimon? Shimon can't give another Reuven. Why can't he lend rhymes? And he also shouldn't lend him any money. You shouldn't lend Shimon any money. You shouldn't borrow any money from Shimon. What's the difference between she'ela and halva? Halva is money. When you borrow money, you don't return the same coins, the same dollar bills, whatever. You return other ones. By a she'ela, I borrow your axe or your shovel or your mixer or whatever. I return the same item. I'm returning the same item, probably a little bit more used, right? Obviously, I used it, right? But in the case, okay, so that's what I'm saying. Also, he shouldn't sell him anything and he shouldn't buy anything from him. So Gemara is going to ask why, if Shimon can't give another Reuven, we understand that. So Shimon can't give another Reuven, so Reuven shouldn't be able to borrow anything, borrow any money, borrow any items, and he can't buy anything from him. But why can't it work the other way? That's what Gemara is going to ask now. So Bishlam at the top of Mem Gimel. Bishlam Yolavenu the Kamahani lay. Okay, I understand. Shimon should not Loyalbedo model mutter. In other words, Shimon can't lend any money to Reuben. That we understand because he's lending him money. He needs money, so you're giving him money. But if he borrows money from him, right? Why can't Shimon borrow money from Reuben? We understand, right? Reuben can't borrow money from Shimon, but why can't Shimon borrow money from Reuben? And you might say, why shouldn't he borrow money from Reuben? Because you know what? Because maybe he does get some love. Maybe he gave him like old coins. He might return new coins. Remember, by halva, it's not the same coins, right? You borrow money by nature. That's the whole idea that milva loads on it. It's meant for spending, right? It's milva is not returning the same thing. So maybe he's going to give him better coins. He gave me use an example here. When I borrowed the money, I took those old red 200 shekel notes and I returned them. I got the new ones, the blue ones, because they're going to be valid for longer, right? I think you can still use the old red ones too, In America, the $100 bills, they got 3 different ones. You can still use the oldest ones, It takes a long time for them to take them out of circulation. So I understand because maybe he'll give us. Also, you shouldn't buy anything from him. Why? Because maybe it's something that Reuben's trying to get rid of, and you're going to give him another that way when you buy something from him because he wasn't able to get rid of it. So the why can't Shimon borrow something from Reuben? Reuben can't have enough from Shimon, right? That's the issue over here. Reuben can't have from Shimon. Why can't Shimon borrow his shovel or borrow his mixer? What pleasure is he going to get out of that? If anything, he's going to give it to back in worse shape, right? When you borrow something from somebody, you're using it up, right? Everything is worse. You got the case all wrong. In this case, as opposed to all the other cases we have where Reuben can't have enough from Shimon, here they both can't have enough from one another. Oh, you're forbidding me from having enough from you. I forbid you having enough. In both cases, they can't. So that made the whole Mishnah make sense then. Neither one can borrow from the other, whether it's money, whether it's an item, or sale. Bayam or no. We're really only saying that Reuben can't have enough from Shimon. So Reuben can't borrow money from him. He can't borrow his item, can't borrow money, and he can't buy anything that'll give him pleasure. But it's Xera, Lishol Mishum Lahashil, V'chein B'kulu Xera. The reason over here in the last case we say that you can't, that Reuben, that Shimon can't borrow something from Reuben because we're afraid if Shimon borrows something from Reuben will come to borrow something from Shimon, land him back, and then he's having an awe. And the same thing about the other ones. It's only Xera. The truth is, in all these cases, only Reuben can't borrow from Shimon or buy from Shimon. But we're afraid if we allow that, you allow the other way too. So that's why it works in the Mishnah. Yeah. Of what? Yeah. So then there's certainly enough.
If I lend you something, I get enough because
that's not quantifiable. You lend me something, I'd say that's just it's an emotional thing. It's like no. All these cases are you're giving him something. You're giving him use of the money or use of the item. That's a real pleasure. But the Tavasana that he gives him the goodwill there is not something that necessarily is forbidden. So the goodwill alone is not. Maybe it's not as much. You can't monetize that as easy as these things. These things are worth money. If I borrow something from somebody, I save that the rental that I have to. If I had to borrow it from a store, I'd have to pay for the rental or something. You're actually saving your money directly. Only that would be forbidden. Yeah. No, you can't be Mekadosh. I don't think you could. If it's not, you have to give her something. First of all, you have to give her something. So if I don't think you can kind of teach with us. No. The Gemara in Kedushin Dapim over there talks about Hana that what you can't be Mekadosh Anisha just with Hana. You could be Mekadosh Anisha. For example, there it talks about being Mekadosh with a loan. There it doesn't work because you're not giving her anything. In other words, let's say you lend a woman $100, and then you say, you owe me $100. I'll tell you what, let that be your kesef kedushin. That doesn't work because since milbalot son, that money spent, you have to give her something right now. So I don't think it works just with tovas son. You have to give her something. You have to give her a ring, money, right, or a star or bia, but it's got to be something that physical. You can't get something tangible. All right, we'll pick him here from the mission tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.
According to the prophet Shmuel.